Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone who is listening to us. I welcome you all in this ACF Asia Clean Energy Forum 2021 session 1.3, which is basically on deep dives at city and national and regional initiatives for low carbon initiatives and achieving NDC targets and beyond. I must thank before we start, I'm the moderator of this session. My name is Anindya Bhattacharya. I'm from India. I'll be moderating this session for next almost 2 hours. And before that, I must thank Asian Development Bank and all the associated agencies and organizations who have supported tirelessly to bring this excellent event online. All we know that during this COVID pandemic, we are really suffering all across the world. But it proves that though we are going through the difficult time, but it is not stopping the good spirit and initiatives moving forward to save this world. So today, this session is basically dedicated mainly to the discussion on identifying the low carbon development pathways for mostly the Asian, but it can cover the other parts of the world as well. But we'd like to go deep into the issues and the solutions, because in today's world, we need solutions rather than plans and policies. So here we'll be trying to understand that what are the technologies, low carbon technologies, how the finance can be arranged, and how the different, the regional, the national, as well as the urban or city level governments and the policymakers can all come together and contribute to this process of achieving the NDC targets, because we are now in the implementation period starting last year. We have 10 more years to achieve those targets. And if not more, we have to achieve as much as possible to save this world. And this pandemic has showed us that unless we unite and work together, it will be very, very difficult for us to survive. So without taking much of my time, I would like to now introduce our first speaker of this session, Amanda Lonsdale. She will be speaking on renewable energy procurement at the small island area. And she's a transaction advisor to Tonga Power Limited under the ADB funded Tonga Renewable Energy Project. In this capacity, she is working to help them to meet the NDC commitments of 70% renewable grid by 2030. She is an expert in climate finance, structuring, investments, and renewable energy project development with more than 20 years of experience in emerging markets. So, and she has worked all across the world. She is an MBA from Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania in Finance and Entrepreneurship, and an MA from Johns Hopkins University School of International Studies in Southeast Asian Studies. She will also be supported by, and also with her colleague, Gavin, who has worked across all facets of the solar and renewable energy industries, including technical, project management, commercial and strategic and transaction and advisory roles. So prior to founding, Gavin worked with BP Solar as an electrical engineer. So he has immense experience in the renewable energy technologies. And Gavin's experience includes the successful delivery of several multi-million-dollar solar projects around Australia, the Pacific, and Asia. So without any other further delay, I'd like to invite Amanda to come and present your interesting stories on Small Island. Amanda, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anindya. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of Tonga Power. And as you noted, we're part of the Asian Development Bank sponsored Tonga Renewable Energy Project, and here to discuss an innovative approach to renewable energy procurement, As Anindya mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague, Gavin Street. Together, the two of us are designing and managing this procurement process, and we'll both be available for questions after the presentation. Okay. So small island states, or small and developing states, or SIDS, face challenges to procuring renewable power on reasonable terms due to lack of scale, logistical challenges due to their remote locations, and extreme weather events. In addition to this, meeting renewable energy targets can lead to a high level of renewable energy penetration, which can cause grid management and spill issues. Tonga, under its nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, has committed to have 70% of its renewable energy generation from renewable resources by 2030. In order to meet this requirement in the most cost-effective and efficient manner, Tonga Power, the national utility, is seeking to carry out a single technology-agnostic procurement. This procurement will focus on dispatchability and will seek to work with an independent power producer to find the appropriate mix of renewable energy and storage solutions in the most cost and energy efficient manner. Tonga Power is intending to issue an expression of interest to solicit responses from potential bidders on key parameters in order to design a procurement and find a trusted partner in the development of Tonga's renewable energy future. Some high-level information on the EOI. We'll be looking at around 35 gigawatt hours of generating capacity annually at a minimum. As I mentioned, it's a technology agnostic procurement, so we think we'll look at a mix of solar and storage plus wind, but we're open to other technologies, and we're really truly looking for an IPP to propose the appropriate solution. Again, focusing on dispatchability to increase renewable energy penetration while minimizing spill, promoting network stability, and guaranteeing renewable power is available 24 hours a day. Like I said, we're looking at about 34 gigawatt hours of generating capacity. However, this quantity could increase based on the status of the current procurements, as well as the growth in energy demand. The graph at the right shows the anticipated generation mix in 2030, with the 34 gigawatt hours as the striped segment in the upper left part of the pie. Below that, you'll see 14 gigawatt hours of renewable energy capacity that's currently in various stages of development. As we noted previously, we want the IPP to develop the best solution, so including some of this flexibility, spill minimization, and cost efficiency. Gavin, if you want to go to the dispatchability.
Sure, thanks, Amanda. So one of the things that we're looking at in this EOI and the tender process is really to try and match the changing demand profile that we might see in Tonga. So there is certainly a rising demand. We expect a rising demand, electricity demand over the next 10 to 20 years on Tonga. And as well as that, we expect there'll be energy efficiency measures. We expect there may be some solar rooftop and other things that may come into the mix. So also managing that with the very high level, the 70% target of renewable energy target that we're looking at in Tonga, we realise dispatchability is key. We really need to understand. We really need the ability to be able to match the generation profile to the load profile. And so the two examples that are shown here on the slides now are looking at the reason for that. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that the graph shows a high ramp rate when demand peaks, and traditionally that has been met by the diesel generators. And we would expect that to perhaps be even exacerbated more as there is more renewable energy penetration into the grid. So that is something that we need to be able to manage. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the duck curve that no doubt you've seen before, which is the as more and more solar perhaps enters into the grid, then we will see a hollowing out of that load, that demand in the middle of the day, and we'll need to be able to have renewable energy available towards the evening and the night time, and to manage the ramp rate that as it goes up that duck curve in the evening time. So we really are trying to match the demand profile with the generation profile. I'll hand back to you there, Amanda.
Great, thanks, Gavin. So aside from that sort of unique aspect of the tender, we're otherwise looking at very standard contract terms. So a long-term PPA, Tonga Power is prepared to provide incentives, making arrangements for land, potentially sharing Forex risk, and also some tax benefits. In addition, as we mentioned, there will be a minimum quantity of energy purchase that we will guarantee. That's with the intention to meet bankability requirements, loan covenants, investor hurdles, et cetera. In terms of the EOI, also fairly standard, besides the sort of first three bullets that are very standard. One of the things we will be looking at is for the bidders to actually put forth a set of solutions or approaches based on certain assumptions around energy quantity, technology, timing, and perhaps other factors. And we'll also be looking for some non-binding indicative pricing around these solutions to better understand the trade-offs and drivers of different approaches. And finally, we'll be looking for bidders to put forth any suggestions to TPL on additional information required to put together a full bid. The intent of the EOI is to develop a short list of bidders that would then go to a full tender. In terms of timing, indicative timeline here, our schedule is largely driven by TPL's priority to get started on commissioning new renewable power in late 2023 or early 2024. As such, we're anticipating issuing the EOI at the end of this month, with the tender process concluded in early 2021. So we hope this has piqued your interest, this high-level overview of this EOI as an innovative approach to renewable procurement for small islands. We're truly excited about it, and I think that it's a way to solve some of Tonga and other small islands' challenges, and look forward to a productive discussion today as well as in the future. To that end, putting my contact information as well as Gavin's here, so feel free to reach out if you don't have your question answered during this panel. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to you, Anindya.
Excellent, Amanda and Gavin. So this is quite an interesting one, because in the small countries, it is very important that we are all talking about promotion of renewables, but there are a lot of the regulatory and the financial issues that are there, which can make it actually successful on the ground. So this, your presentation is bringing that side. So I just like to open for 1 minute to ask the audience that if you have any clarification question for Amanda and Gavin, please, put your question right away. We'll wait for a minute. If not, then we'll move to the next speaker. And of course, all the audience, all the people who are listening to us, they will get a chance during the full Q&A session in the later parts of the session. So you can hold your questions for that. But if you have any clarification questions, please do it now. Okay, if not, then I'd now move to the next, our presenter, Mr. Reggie Pillai. He is the president of India Smart Grid Forum since its beginning, 2011. And he's also the chairman of Global Smart Grid Federation since November 2016. He's an internationally renowned expert in the field of renewable energy and electricity sector. And he has studied engineering, finance, management, and law. And he has worked with National Thermal Power Corporation, IBM, and in different capacities with ADB, World Bank, and USAID. He is a recognized thought leader in clean energy, smart grid technologies, smart cities, and electric mobility. And he's a key popular, because we all know him, Reggie is a popular keynote speaker at international symposium on this domain, and he has also contributed to several articles, books, and research reports, white papers, and so on and so forth. So anything we talk about him is falling short. Today I would like to hear from Reggie, your experience. I think you'll be speaking on electric cooking, which is perhaps a very, very important topic in the context of how to promote clean energy in the context of developing countries, where we need to clean up our cooking sector to save not only the women from the indoor air pollution, but also to clean up our grid through the renewable energy. So over to you, Reggie. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind words, Anindya, and a very warm greetings from India, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the fellow panelists and other distinguished participants at this workshop. And first of all, let me start with thanking ADP for inviting me to make this presentation. So last year, sometime November, we had released a white paper on electric cooking and how it can be promoted, what is its relevance, how it's going to influence or impact the electricity distribution business in the country. So we often hear about outdoor air pollution. I live in New Delhi, which is the most polluted city in the world. From October to February, every day in primetime news, as well as front page of the newspaper, people talk about the biggest pollution. It's something from 400 to 600, at times even beyond 600 microgram per meter cube of PM 2.5 in the air. It's dangerous. Sometimes even some of the airline don't fly to India, they suspend it, and it's so air quality is so bad. So this we've been experiencing for several years. However, seldom discussed about the indoor house, in-home air pollution. In cities, we still don't know the exact numbers, but in a study conducted by WWF a couple of years ago, 2018, 2019, in the rural India, they have found that outdoor air pollution is 22 to 112 microgram, the PM 2.5, whereas indoor, it varies from 106 to 512, which is very dangerous. The safe limit for PM 2.5 is below 40, as all of you know. And in cities like Delhi, even now, 18 to 20% people cook with us biomass or firewood. And the government of India 6 years ago launched a very, very immensely successful program called Ujala, in which LPG connection was given to more than 200 million households. Despite that, we are about 63% of the rural households still cook with firewood and biomass, which is leading to about these numbers are of India, but maybe equally applicable to other developing countries as well. So these are India alone. One estimate says that 600,000 people died of in-home air pollution in 2019, and I'm told globally about 4 million people die prematurely each year due to household air pollution. So, and also we are convinced that to meet the NDC target in developing countries, we must reduce emission from the kitchen. This is a very important and often neglected program. And many times there are many programs for decades being conducted by international funding agencies and other think tanks about improving the efficiency of the cooking stoves, both the fire-based cooking stoves as well as LPG cooking stoves. But those marginal improvement, we believe, cannot meet the NDC target because of the sheer number of new cooking, the kitchens which is being set up. As the population increases, more people start living separately. So the sheer number of cooking stoves added to the cooking the stock every year, that marginal improvement in efficiency is not going to meet the desired result. So what happened in India in last a couple of decades, we've been doing targeted programs for electrification of all the villages. 690,000 villages we completed electrification by April 2018. And another very successful program, we electrified almost 99% of the households by March 2019. Today, perhaps all of them do not get 24/7 electricity. And the next major challenge which we are currently doing in India is to improve or strengthen the medium voltage and low voltage grid to give 24/7 electricity to all this newly electrified homes and other population. So in that scheme, ISGF is advocating that with marginal additional investment, we will be able to give 3 kilowatt to 5 kilowatt connection to all the households, which will be helpful in meeting their cooking and cooling demand both. So this is something which we brought out in our white paper, which we published in November 2020. So Government of India at that point in time was planning a new program, Go Electric, which was to promote electric mobility. Because of our advocacy, that program has been expanded to include another component, which is electric cooking and electric mobility. So e-cooking and e-mobility, both Government of India is actively promoting now, and we are playing a pivotal role in that. So on the LPG side, as I said, that some 275 million households use LPG. There is a subsidy from Government of India for poor people, but that subsidy is not even 25% of the total cost. And the cost, because we import LPG, the price of it keep fluctuating and going up. So kerosene we used to use a lot of kerosene, but last 10 to 15 years, we drastically reduced the kerosene use in cooking. But another very interesting number is that about 300 million LPG cylinders were handled every year. So this big heavy cylinders, which are 30-40 kilos, which is being delivered at doorsteps of 300 million of them handled. Just imagine delivering a cylinder at the doorstep of a household and taking the empty cylinder back. Look at the logistics. Look at the energy spent on transporting this several times. It is neither sustainable economically nor from the perspective of energy efficiency. So another interesting things which have taken place is that today we have a large range of electric cooking appliances, from electric pressure cooker, which is something a new entrant. Almost every item it can replace many of the other items and can cook almost every cuisine in that. We have from all the way up to hot plate to induction cook stove to air fryer. All these are today available at affordable cost, and it is only a campaign to make public awareness and a shift from the traditional way of cooking to using these appliances. Induction cook stove has a thermal efficiency up to 84%, which is twice that of a gas cooktops. And electric pressure cooker, as I said, has emerged as the most efficient device for cooking. Over 1 hour cooking period, a pressure cooker uses approximately 1/4 of the electricity of an electric hot plate. So this gives something about this chart talks about for heating 10 liters of water in today's scenario with a subsidized LPG cylinder. It's about 5 rupee 9 paise, and unsubsidized LPG cylinder, it will be more than 10 rupees 80 paise, and with an electric stove it varies from 5 rupee 91 paise to 5 rupee 21 paise on the induction thing. So it's clearly is cheap and sustainable. And this chart also gives some other numbers which I won't get into the details of it. Scenario 2, look at the bottom. To cook 1 kg of rice, it requires about 1.5 megajoules of energy, and from a energy required with the cooking appliances, 50% efficiency for the gas stove, whereas 80+% efficiency for the induction cook stove. The prices are almost comparable. So there is every reason for rationale for promoting electric cooking. So the money which we spend in subsidies is something like $5 billion. We $5 to $6 billion in last every year. We've been spending that for subsidizing the LPG, which is being given to homes for cooking. And still, as I said, 63% of the rural households don't use, and they take firewood or cow dung and those kind of things, which is also leading to deforestation. And who are the maximum affected? It is the women and children. And children are taken out of school so that they can go and fetch drinking water and firewood for cooking. This is what happens in rural area. So with there is another very interesting thing is that surplus energy is available on the grid several times during the day because of the change which has happened with the distributed generation. When solar panels are generating maximum electricity during the afternoon time, some of the cooking can happen that time even remotely. A smart plug today costs less than $10 even in India, and most households in the urban areas, they have broadband connectivity. A smart plug connected to your internet at home, you can remotely operate any of those cooking devices sitting in office or from your workplace. So also electric cooking can assist the grid in demand growth and load balancing. So we believe that 2-3 years of LPG or kerosene subsidy will be sufficient to strengthen the electricity distribution grid to support electric cooking. As I said, 3 to 5 kilowatt of connection for every household. We should be able to do it in the next 5 to 7 years. That's what we would be advocating to accommodate in this Go Electric program with the electric cooking component. So electricity, some of the important things which we'll be doing is the commercial kitchens, which is the hotels, restaurants, canteens, military mess, college, all those canteens can be immediately electrified, and the gas can be made free from there. Estimation, we're planning to do an estimation of the capex to strengthen the medium voltage and low voltage grid, so that 24/7 supply can be given to people at 3 to 5 kilowatt connections to all households. And lifestyle cost of comparison of building new city gas distribution. So the government of India has also given new licenses for city gas distribution to supply piped natural gas, and doing a comparative study between how much that is going to cost versus strengthening the electric grid and also subsidizing the electric cooking appliances. So this study we are currently doing, and the number which we got for the new city gas distribution connection, each connection is about 25,000 rupees, which is approximately $350. Whereas we electrified all the programs under that Saubhagya programs, all the household electrification, we have done something like $50 to $70 per household. And we firmly believe that another $100 per household, we should be able to strengthen it to 3 to 5 kilowatt. And we are doing detailed study on that. So annual cost of LPG cylinder distribution in rural area, again, strengthening the electric network, which is a one-time cost, and also availability of these appliances in different regions, and augmenting the manufacturing capacity of such appliances within the country. And these are all will be part of the detailed study which we have embarked upon, and also the assessment of the skill development, employment generation potential against the job loss in the LPG distribution segment today, and the health benefit from transition from firewood or biomass to electric cooking, and the avoided cost of preventing healthcare to millions of people suffering from indoor air pollution. That's a significant component. And also detailed assessment and estimation of environmental benefit from electric cooking by reducing CHG emission and also avoiding deforestation. Development of different strategies for electric cooking, promotion of electric cooking, the campaign. It's a lifestyle change which will happen over a generation. So what I ate is not what exactly my children eating, and I'm sure my grandchildren will be eating something different, and they can be motivated to cook all those items with the electric cooking. And last year, very interestingly, after the lockdown, complete lockdown which happened after the pandemic, last year, the North India summer, when all the maids and the cooks and all the servants left for their villages, we found that all the middle class people and the rich people, they've been complaining about standing in the kitchen in the 48-degree, 50-degree centigrade in India, and none of the kitchens in even the rich people's homes are not electrified. Sorry, not air conditioned. So standing there and cooking is difficult. So with an electric cooking, you can do that. You cannot do that with a gas stove or other forms of cooking. But with an electric cooking, you can have a fully air conditioned kitchen, even for the middle class and others who can afford that. So leveraging renewable energy for electric cooking and the integration of cooking appliances with the grid. So smart cooking with the green electricity bought from the cheapest resource on the grid is something which is feasible with today's technology. We have done some very interesting pilot projects on peer-to-peer trading of rooftop solar energy. 2 projects we have commissioned recently in India, one in Uttar Pradesh and another one in Delhi. So that is on a blockchain platform. All that could be, that emerging technologies could be demonstrated. And this is the way we believe that cleaning the kitchen or reducing or eliminating the emission from the kitchen is going to be very important component of meeting NDC target. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'll be available for question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. And this is really an excellent presentation and a lot of insights that you have brought out, because cooking is one area, I think in most of the cases is being ignored while doing the energy plans and policies. But your insight is really bringing the interesting story that how the electrification of cooking can brought the multiple benefits, not only emissions and pollutions, but it can also do the grid management. And it can also contribute to the national fiscal, management by reducing the subsidies that is going there. So thank you, Pillai. And then I think we can move to the next presenter. And so our next presenter is Robert Kramer. So he is a result-driven manager with numerous years of experience in project deployment and management, relationship building, business operations management, risk assessment and mitigation, and strategic planning within highly challenging environment. He has dynamic and he has communication, negotiation, and relationship management skills. So Mr. Kremers has proven capability to identify, acquire, and exploit growth opportunities and proactively monitor industry trends. And he is the Senior Director, Energy Services at Smart Power in Myanmar. So Robert will be speaking today on Energy Impact Fund, enabling energy access and ending energy poverty, which is very, very important topic in today's world. So Robert, floor is yours.
Thank you. Oh, Tonga, take me away. It really stirs the imagination thinking about an island right now. Not the Tom Hanks, Wilson, Castaway type experience, but something more pleasant and vacation-esque. I think this whole COVID experience has really given us that castaway feeling, but that's a nice segue into the island that I would like to introduce you to in the Andaman Sea in the far reaches of Myanmar. Okay. It's a 4,000 strong community that has for generations earned its livelihood from the sea. And as enchanting as it sounds, earning a life from the sea truly is earned. And sometimes you earn enough to pay for your life on the island. A life on the island is very expensive because a lot of the materials that you need actually come from the mainland. And one of the key things is electricity. And for that requires diesel fuel. And so given where this island was, they were only able to bring in a little bit of diesel fuel that could power the community for a couple of hours a day. But it also provided some fresh water. But one day, all of that changed. All of a sudden, livelihoods improved. Nearly all the island had access to clean water. And then street lights made streets safe, and the nights were less dark. And then evening visits from friends became more frequent. And then Dani, a fisheries entrepreneur and one of the largest employers on the island, saw business double, and she hired more people. What happened? Reliable, affordable electricity. In January 2021, a hybrid solar mini grid arrived and could provide 24/7 power. Prosperity followed electricity. All around the world, electricity is at the heart of economic growth. It illuminates lives, transforms cities, communities, and households. And for a long time, I thought I was by myself as an electricity geek. But today, it's a hot topic. It's on the move. People are talking about it and its opportunities and the tomorrows that it's shaping. You're talking about electric vehicles, currency mining, DREs, energy storage, endless possibilities. But in Myanmar, we still have a lot to do. We have 28 million people without affordable, reliable electricity. And this is stifling economic growth, and it's putting the hope of a modern economy further and further out of reach. And this is doubly so for the rural communities where the loss of this opportunity, it's even graver. It means backsliding into poverty. The journey to 100% electrification is never cheap, and Myanmar has a goal of reaching 100% electrification by 2030. The journey is expensive, and it's going to require billions and billions of dollars across the power value chain. And this is really a key headwind facing Myanmar right now, as it tries to lift itself from being the least electrified country in Southeast Asia. One of the things in the policies for Myanmar is that communities are required under the self-reliant electrification policy to provide their own low voltage network. Low voltage networks are very expensive. And when the daily minimum wage is $3 and it's only $1 in rural communities, it's nearly an impossible challenge. So this really leaves us at a crossroads in Myanmar, unconnected or connected. Lives left behind, or do we provide lives with opportunity? I say connected, and that's what the Energy Impact Fund is doing. The Energy Impact Fund is a flexible, impact-driven vehicle operating to the exclusive benefit of rural communities, businesses, and households through creating de-risking products, promoting energy access, and providing direct support for connection financing, productive use financing, and other scalable solutions. We are starting to move the needle on both energy access and the access to finance issue. It's a relatively simple process that we follow: design, engage, support, reinvest. The design, we've committed a lot of due diligence from our own products that we've run over the years. We also have a very deep-rooted history in Myanmar, so there's been a lot of learning that comes from that. So we leverage what we know, but we also are constantly collaborating with communities, businesses, households, microfinance institutions, local commercial banks, state banks, donors and investors, and anybody else that will talk to us. And then we engage. We work directly with communities, businesses, and households to deploy our solutions. And then the support that we provide, we have specialized teams that go into these communities, and they provide governance training, they provide financial training, and they also help the entrepreneurs, and we provide technical support. And then when the community pays this back, we reinvest. The bigger part of all of this is it's a dynamic learning model, and it's key to providing the empirical information to inform the evidence base for the financing of rural electrification. This has gone a long way to informing many of the larger facilities that we've designed. There's no visibility into the local communities from a rural perspective, and we're able to shed light on that. Does it work? Absolutely. Electrification is expensive, and we have proven that access to affordable finance over time, it's the answer. Communities, businesses, households, they all want affordable finance for electrification. We've seen an increase in incomes, we've seen improved livelihoods, we've seen a decrease in energy poverty. But the numbers, they tell part of the story, but it's both the tangible and the intangible. It's becoming connected to the modern global economy. It's increasing incomes. It's improving community resilience. It's opportunity. It's bringing an end to energy poverty. But it's more than all of that, it's hope. And that's what the Energy Impact Fund has been greatly successful at. Thank you.
Robert, thank you so much for bringing this very insightful thing, that the rural electrification and how it can transform the livelihood from mere nothing to a successful livelihood. So this is not the story of Myanmar only. It is the same kind of stories we have been hearing in India also, in Bangladesh, in all this developing world, where electricity plays the pivotal role in changing the livelihood pattern. And it is absolutely true that this is the key for economic prosperity of the country. So We come to the end of our first part of this session, where we have actually heard three eminent speakers from their respective experiences. And, they highlighted three different issues, which are quite relevant in today's world, especially in the context of electrification, bringing renewable energy in the system, and cleaning the grid and bringing the sustainable development in our agenda. So Amanda and Gavin talked about the Tonga, the small country, the electrification process, how the regulatory arrangement could bring the success on the ground. Not only the technology, but the regulation and the system should be in place, which can actually make things happen on the ground. Then we heard Reggie, who spoke about the electrification of cooking, which is perhaps a fascinating thing that can happen in developing world, where it can help in different aspects, not only the emissions and pollution reduction, it can also do the grid management, demand management, and it can encourage more and more renewable to come into the system. And it can also contribute to the fiscal arrangement of the country. And finally, we heard Robert, who talked about the new concept of energy impact fund. I am really, fascinated to hear about this kind of concept, like the dynamic engagement model for rural electrification, which has been trying and experimenting in Myanmar. Perhaps I hope that this can be expanded beyond Myanmar, going to other countries as well. So now we'll move to our second part, which is long-awaited, the panel discussions. We'll be joining by two additional experts and prominent and eminent experts in the field of energy. Before I introduce them, I'd just like to talk about a minute on what is this panel discussion all about and what is the purpose and what we'd like to bring out after this deliberation. So as you know that this is the time when the world is implementing the NDC targets. All the countries have their targets. They are moving towards implementation of those targets. And also now, given the current situation, it is also essential that world should move much beyond NDC targets, because it has been proved even in numerous occasions, not only by IPCC, but by different experts and researchers, that only achieving NDC target may not be sufficient to reduce the disaster that we are expecting through climate change and global warming. So we need to go much beyond that. So in that context, everyone needs to work together to contribute. So not only the national governments, also it needs to be trickled down to the city level, where the urbanization, because in Asia, the urbanization is very, very rapid. Millions of people are now moving from rural to urban areas. So the urban bodies, the localities, the cities, they have a huge role to play. So this discussion will be focusing on basically three aspects. One is that the new emerging technologies that will play a pivotal role in this kind of transition. So we need to have some kind of a disruptive technology, I can say it that way, that we need to leapfrog to certain technologies so that we can, achieve that both the targets. Like we need to grow, we need to develop in a sustainable manner. On the other hand, we also need to reduce our impacts, not only the carbon impacts, but also the ecological impact as well, that how we can manage that. So we need to hear from our experts that what they're thinking in that direction. Second is that the penetration of renewable energy. We are all talking about that renewable is the future of this world, because more renewable comes into the system, we are more safe. Now, whether and how this technology, because we all know that bringing renewable in the system is also bringing additional cost, because you need a lot of other things to be in place. Like you need to you need to work on your existing grid system, which may not be able to capture so much of the informed power like renewables. So you need to support that with some other technologies like storages and all. So how those technologies can contribute to that, and what the experts are thinking on that line. What will be the challenges of bringing renewables, especially for the developing countries? And finally, I would like to emphasize on that how would like to, how the experts are thinking that the cities should play a role in contributing to these national targets in NDC and going beyond that, because all these cities will also contribute to this process, and aggregated, we should achieve the overall objective. So I will stop here, and then I will invite two of my additional panelists who will be joining us. So I'll invite Dr. Thang Nam Do. He is a research fellow at Grand Challenge Program Zero Carbon Energy for Asia Pacific at the Australian National University. And his current research projects include drivers and barriers to Vietnam's solar PV and offshore wind power, Vietnam's success in solar and wind energy policy, ASEAN cross-border electricity trade, carbon pricing options for Vietnam and ASEAN. And before joining ANU, he worked with Vietnam Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment as Deputy Director General of International Cooperation, Deputy Director of Environmental Science and Global Environment Facilities, Operational Focal Point. He was also chair of ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change and National Focal Point of ASEAN Working Group on Environmentally Sustainable Cities and Water Environment Partnership of Asia. So I welcome Dr. Thang Nam Do in this session. And he will also be joined with another eminent experts in this field, Mitchell Abundo. I'm sorry if whether I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I don't know. I'll try to do that. Mitchell is currently the Assistant Director and Program Manager for the Sub-NTU Joint Lab. The Sub-NTU Joint Lab conducts R&D in technologies like autonomy, data analytics, machine learning, and systems engineering. Previously, he was the Program Integration Manager at Rolls-Royce NTU Corporation Laboratory in Singapore. And also he did his research fellowship with the Wind and Marine Renewables Group in the Energy Research Institute at NTU. So welcome, Mitchell, to this session. And I think we have already heard all of our presenters, and I now introduce two of my fellow panelists who will be discussing on that. So I have already raised these 3 points of discussion. So I'd like to start from Dr. Thang Do to basically elaborate on his view, these points from his experience, not only from Vietnam, but as a whole, because he is also working at ASEAN. So I'd like to hear from you, Dr. Do, that how you see that these emerging technologies, especially in the renewable sector, can contribute to NDCs and going beyond. What are the challenges of renewables in the system right now? And how do you feel, because you are also part of the sustainable cities, so how do you think that cities should play a pivotal role in these contexts? So, Dr. Do?
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to join this forum and share some of my ideas. I will start with the emerging technologies. For developing countries, I would think about low-hanging fruits technologies first, and those are solar and wind. Recently, as you know, the technology costs of solar and wind have declined rapidly, around 10 to 12% per year. So solar and wind technologies have been becoming more affordable for developing countries. For example, Vietnam last year achieved 16 gigawatt solar and wind installed capacity. And that increased from less than 200 megawatt 2 years ago. So in just 2 years, Vietnam could achieve very high solar and wind power installed capacity. And that also largely thanks to the strong commitment by the policy, by the government in terms of issuing the feed-in tariff, very generous feed-in tariff. So other ASEAN countries and also other developing countries, I see that a lot of potential for solar and wind in terms of renewable technologies. The second point, what are the challenges associated with the renewable energy transitions in developing countries? I think first of all is the transmission grid. Most of the countries, developing countries, have limited capacity in terms of grid transmission and also limited capacity in operating the renewable energy electricity mix system. So those are the key barriers to solar and wind adoption observed in Vietnam and also in some other Southeast Asian countries. The next point is about the city's role. We have recently conducted some studies focusing on Vietnam, asking the question, what were the key drivers for the success of solar and wind uptake in Vietnam? And we found that the public demand for clean air has been a very important driver for the government to take actions. So the roles of the city here could be raising awareness about the air quality, facilitating the community to raise their voice, to raise their concerns about the pollution issues, and that would contribute to creating demand for renewable energy, for solar and wind uptake, because those technologies could help address local pollution as well as the global pollution. So I will stop here for your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Do. I think this is very, very crucial point that you have raised. And I noted down that the citizens' demand for clean energy is the key driver for this. I really appreciate these points. I think very few, deliberation I have at least heard that where, people talked about the involvement of the citizen. And I think that is perhaps one of the key consideration should be for the city governments, that how the citizens should be empowered to think for and the demand for the clean energy and the clean air per se. So I really appreciate your point. I will come back to you maybe after a round of discussion and the deliberation by the other panelists. So I'll now move to Mitchell. So I'd like to hear from you that, your background, you are really working in the domain of the data science and analytics and the technical side, that how the data, I think, is also very crucial for this promotion of renewables. Yeah. So these questions stands for you also, but I would also, I think that the audience will be really enlightened if you can also highlight your experience from your experience of handling that from the data analytics perspective, that how that can also contribute to the promotion of renewables and bringing these low carbon technologies in the system.
Sure. Thanks, Anindya. If you can hear me, yes, you can just call me Michael. Yeah, Michael or Mike. Yeah. Sure. So very interesting to look at the technologies that may be applied for the energy sector or during this energy transition to support the rollout of renewables and the uptake of energy efficiency programs for decarbonization. You also have, even as part of the ongoing global transformations, digitalization. And I cannot emphasize the role of digitalization in our journey towards sustainability. Even now, we talk about smart grids, we talk about decentralization, and digitalization of the energy sector is part and parcel of that transition. I would say the digital transformation of sustainable energy transitions increases the success. So I've had experience in Singapore, Indonesia, and the Philippines in terms of looking at microgrids or off-grid island electrification in different contexts, be it disaster relief or disaster response to, let's say, just household level electrification and also community level electrification. What I see is in terms of technologies, it's not about having high tech systems actually. It's about deploying appropriate technologies. It may be low tech, but for that particular community, it is appropriate at that point in time. The more appropriate your solutions are, as what we find in the energy impact presentation earlier, the better it is for the energy transition of those communities. So decarbonization, decentralization, digitalization, these 3 Ds, I would say, go hand in hand as suitable technologies can enable them to happen. So people talk about artificial intelligence. Sure, there may be advantages to doing that for certain franchise areas, especially in cities where you have lots and lots of sensors and lots of data, but we are not there yet in terms of developing countries. We are at the very beginning of where these locations may not even have energy security or very low energy access, right? Defining the metrics in this journey takes a dynamic sort of morphing form, I would say, where you have basic needs to be supported first, and you can move on to other more comprehensive transformations, but we need to be aware of them. So right now we're seeing electrification that includes end-use products and services, be it electric cooking, water, transportation, electric vessels, smart farming, aquaculture, agriculture. All of those sectors need to transform together with what we call the clean energy scenario, right? And it might mean different things for those different sectors as well. So if we had appropriate technologies that are locally supported, in this case, let's say local context of supply chain, whether it's manufacturing, assembly, installation, operation, maintenance, and servicing, all of those should be embedded with a mindset that uses latest know-how, maybe latest tools that could then help support the uptake and transition of clean energy scenarios in not just cities, but also islands and also other communities. So I guess the key thing there is to look at the appropriateness of the technology that we're using. And when we talk about, let's say, how can cities play crucial roles, we all know that there needs to be, at least in the context of the Philippines, the local government units need to take ownership on these types of programs. And it's going to be challenging to roll it out. Even if you had funding for them, they may not have the capability to actually absorb, nor deploy, nor design and simply implement these programs just because of a lack of know-how and capability to do so. So one of the key things where funding can come in, be it from donors or support funding, etc., is not just in the technical assistance, but also in the project development, design, and implementation assistance, right? So more often than not, a lot of our funding entities probably don't want to focus on that just yet. They want to do a lot of expert stuff, making sure that all the science and technology are covered and well grounded. There's technical assistance in terms of putting in, let's look at energy storage systems, or let's look at hydrogen. Maybe in the future there are hydrogen microgrids. Let's look at the hybrid electrics. Sure, all of that is very good, but then when you come to implementation in the local context, you end up with basically people saying, all well and good, nice and high tech. So how do I include that in my budget? And what's needed to support it? So they are looking for templates like these. And we've spoken to a lot of local government units. We have this program now under with funding not just ADB and not just EU and all these other folks coming into the Southeast Asian context, but even private donors and organizations. And I think there's just red ocean already in the area of supporting policy transitions, and there's also a lot of pool of funding already in the private side to look at rollout of projects. But in between, when you have potential private-public partnerships happening, the public sector is just not as savvy right now when it comes to project design and project structuring. So that is an area where there may be a gap and where people can come in and help. Yeah. So I would just say that data will drive. Data is evidence. So data-driven or evidence-driven design and let's say visioning and even planning, right, will be one of the most critical methodologies when we move forward, because you start off with what's already something that's known, was something that you've historically known, but even data gathering right now is not yet as complete. So there's a little bit of a fuzzy relationship there as well. But so more and more, I would include that as projects get rolled out, please don't take for granted that data and data gathering, data management, data monitoring, those will all help inform and accelerate in an exponential manner future projects that are to come. So we talk about learning rates, etc., right? So the learning rates need to improve as well. So the more that we have data, the more that we digitalize our efforts, the better it is, not just for current projects, but for future projects. I hope that helps, Anindya. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think this is excellent. And I picked up this word you said, that deployment, the technology which is appropriate. I think this is very, very important message that you are giving, that there could be n number of technology solutions available for the countries, but whether those technologies are appropriate for these region or the country or even for the city, I think that needs to be clarified before selecting those technologies. Otherwise, either it will be a misfit for that country, or this may not be taking off. People might be initially excited, but later on they will realize that, oh, this is not for us.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your, and also your 3D concepts. I think that so that is also very, very important. I think we should keep on the merging the digitization, the decarbonization, and then so the development. So all these things should work together. And we should actually use the strength of digital world, the digitization, for the betterment in the context of assessing the situation through proper data support. So now I think I started getting certain questions, but before I ask the specific speakers, I'd like to ask Amanda and also to Gavin, that from your experience, because you are working very closely with a very small government compared to the other big countries, of course, and you are also contributing to the grassroots level problem, like the regulatory issues, that how because most of the countries, though they have a lot of potential of renewables, they have the finance to do that, the international support is there, but when it comes to the actual implementation on the ground, that when the plants are getting set up, how it should operate, who will regulate it. So what is your experience, that how these challenges, because in my opinion, the regulatory challenges are quite a significant challenge of successful implementation of renewables, be it solar or be it any other technology. So how do you think that these can actually help to overcome these challenges and bring more renewables especially in the small island or maybe a small country context?
That's a very good question. I think, and Gavin certainly chime in here. You know, Tonga is unique in many aspects, in that it's well set up. The utility is actually a well-run utility, and they've got a clear sort of delineation between the regulatory aspects as well as the environmental aspects. And so they actually do a good job. So I think they follow sort of the standard when I've worked in energy projects in other countries where you've got, a strong utility, a bankable utility. You've got a regulator, an independent regulator that actually works with the utility on setting the tariff rates. And then also some independence in those environmental aspects and the community aspects as well. So actually, I see Tonga as a pretty strong example that way. And one of the other things where we're really working through this procurement is looking at, I think to Michael and Tong's point of the low hanging fruit and sort of knowing what's appropriate. And so in both seeking out independent power producers who can help us figure out the best and most appropriate solution for the technology there, not to get fancy, but to figure out what's going to work there. And then similarly meeting that with, sort of where Tonga Power and the government of Tonga's strengths are, what does the government have as its own levers, be that facilitating land acquisition or, managing some Forex risk, or giving tax breaks. And so that we're trying to sort of package that together so that everyone's kind of meeting their own strengths. And so I think it's actually a good example in terms of a lot of countries that I've worked in. I don't know, Gavin, if you had any more context to add there.
No, just a little maybe. I think they're all very good points that you raised and the other panelists have raised. Probably something I would mention in there is collaboration. It's very important to work and communicate with everyone involved. And I think that is being done quite well with Tonga and what we're looking for through this process as well. And it really is about understanding what the needs are, what the level of sophistication is in, say, communications. I think one of the big issues is understanding what is going on and getting the feedback from the system on a live state. So a lot of things that can help would be having a good control system in place. And being able to control it and monitor what is actually happening in real time. But of course, that can be difficult when you may not have communication networks across the island. And how do you implement something like that? And what is it that you need? Now, in Tonga, we're quite lucky. There is that communication network, and that is being improved as well. But in a lot of island states, that may be an issue. So. There are, and so therefore, do you work? Do you try and implement something very sophisticated and that would work very well, or as Michael says, do you build something that's appropriate and something maybe as not quite as sophisticated there? And the only way you find all of that out is the collaboration that you have with the utility and with the stakeholders that are in country.
Yeah, Gavin, I think that's excellent. And in fact, just a small, point from my side that what Amanda also mentioned, that the land, actually that, which is also a big issue. In fact, we are also seeing the same issues in India and other parts of the, this developing world. Getting the land in a proper way so that it can be dedicatedly converted for this, used for this promotion of RE. That should also be properly looked into. And in my opinion, I think this is one area under the regulatory regime or the framework is still ignored in most of the planning and policy making activities in the country. So I think that is one area that needs to be strengthened. So thank you for your comment. And there are a couple of questions that has already been raised. And before I ask that also, I'd like to come back to Reggie, because this is a very interesting area of this electrification of cooking area. And so the question is that, Reggie, what do you think that these electrification of cooking sector can contribute to, you have already highlighted, but from these 3 points, that how these electrification of cooking can contribute towards promotion of renewable, cleaning the grid, and also contributing to the emissions reduction. So, and how the city you have already mentioned that during pandemic, this has been kind of a issue that felt by the urbanites that who are not used to cook in the kitchen, at least in India, they faced huge problem of standing and cooking in a very high temperature. So if you can quickly, Reggie, elaborate and give your comment on these points, that will be really good.
Thank you, Anindya. So how electrification of cooking will eliminate emission from the kitchen is a straightforward. There is no rocket science. It's straightforward. If you don't burn any fuel, and electricity is the cleanest fuel at the user end, and more of it today we generating from the renewable resources. So there is no issue. The biggest challenge in this is going to be the cultural difference, cultural issues. When I talk to people, they say that it's difficult to make dosha from electric cooking. It's difficult to make roti from that. So we have tried and seen that there are many NGOs working in this area. It's more of a what you call a cultural shift and customer engagement. This will happen over the. It won't happen overnight, but over the years, at least the next generation, from the next decade onwards, majority of them will find it much more convenient and efficient. And as I said, people can be incentivized to buy electricity during surplus during the day, particularly in the afternoons when the maximum solar generation takes place. So those are all very simple, straightforward things. But in the main theme of the conference, which you said, what city government should do to reduce emissions so that NDC targets can be met. I have a couple of points. I will, if you permit, I will take a few minutes to elaborate on that. So
yes, please.
One of them is about having energy efficient and grid interactive buildings and campuses. The typical buildings which we have today in developing as well as developed countries consume about 200 to 400 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. And today's technology and materials can make buildings which consume well below 50 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. And no mandate is there anywhere to do that. Architects go and make glossy buildings so that people get attracted and buy, and those are highly energy inefficient buildings. We should make it mandatory that all new buildings in all cities to be mandated to have less than 100 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. So that's one thing. And all this buildings should be made grid interactive, particularly large buildings and campuses should be made grid interactive. And like a smart microgrid, which is connected to the grid, which can island from the grid whenever it is required. And also with solar panels and electric vehicles connected to the building, that can become a self-consuming intelligent microgrid, which can island from the grid and even sell electricity stored in the batteries back to the grid during peak hours at high prices, and buy from the grid when there is surplus and the prices are low. And next important point I like to mention is about the electric mobility. We have not touched upon much, but the cities need to promote electric mobility, create charging infrastructure, and also mandate to public transportation. A city government or a national government cannot tell me I should buy a diesel or a petrol or an electric car. That is a consumer's choice in most democracies. But they can always say that all public transport, all new buses in, say, Delhi from 2022 will be electric. All new three-wheelers and taxis in Delhi or any city for that matter from 2022 will be electric. That is well within their right to do that, and they should do that. And by doing that, over a period of 5-10 years, all public transportation will be electrified. And also the new range of buildings vehicles which are coming, they are all talking about. Earlier, we talked about grid to vehicle to grid, V2G. Now the new generation vehicles which are coming, vehicle to anything, V2X. So these grid integrated vehicles can offer grid services. And interestingly, your rooftop solar or the distributed renewable energy and electric vehicles both are connected to the low voltage grid. And the variations or the intermittency of the distributed renewable resources can be mitigated by the electric vehicle batteries. So it is a very simple technology. It can be done. Earlier, vehicle manufacturers were not offering V2G because of the warranty of the batteries, which is now gone. batteries have become much more efficient. V2G is the norm and the standards we've been making in India as well as in many places. So the grid integrated vehicle can be aggregated as virtual power plant, which can offer grid services, frequency and voltage regulations in markets. So electricity markets. Next big thing is the district cooling systems. Yesterday evening we had a ISGF organized a deep dive workshop, 8 p.m. Manila time to 9:30. So district cooling systems is a centralized cooling system where you have generate chilled water at 5 degrees centigrade, and through insulated pipe you give it to every building where heat transfer plates take that chillness to the air handling unit. Each of the building will not have the compressor and the air conditioning system, only air handling unit. More than 50% of the total energy consumption comes down in a city or a community or a street. And when we are able to give electricity, water, gas, everything as a service against a monthly fee, we should be able to give cooling also as a service to the buildings. And that is the way forward. We should promote for that. We have white papers, we have yesterday's recordings, where many eminent speakers were there. Please look at it. I mentioned in the previous presentation about the P2P trading of electricity. So peer-to-peer trading of electricity on blockchain, which may be promoted and transparent accounting can be done. Each one buying it can have a green certificate, which will help them in emission reduction, etc. And another important thing is the new generation of appliances, which are smart appliances, which can interact with the grid and buy electricity from the cheapest source, electricity, the cleanest or greenest electricity from the cheapest source, which is available on the grid, and schedule that appliance's operation accordingly. One example, I would say, the millions or rather billions of refrigerators which are connected to the grid today, they run their defrost cycle whenever the equipment feel it is to be done, or when it goes above a threshold point. There is no need for it to do that. If it, with a little intelligence, a refrigerator can run its defrost cycle when there is less load on the grid, and or when the fridge can buy cheapest electricity from a source. And actually, more than compression cycle, defrost cycle actually takes more electricity in most of the previous generation or even the current generation of the fridges. In developing countries, on all the buildings we have, big buildings, we have DG set, diesel generation set for emergency backup power. So in India, we have many of those, even in our national capital region in Delhi and its surroundings. Most of the buildings have 5 megawatt, 7 megawatt, 10 megawatt DG sets. And these are operated seldom, but in some areas it's operated several hours every day. But this need to be banned. And today's price of diesel being so high and the price of lithium-ion batteries being so less, we can replace through transparent business model or viable business models. We can replace this DG set with the lithium-ion batteries, and those lithium-ion batteries will be able to give grid services. Typically in a DG set, maybe it may be used only few hours in a month, whereas a lithium-ion battery that can be leased back by the utility for grid support services, for renewable integration, peak load shaving, load shifting, so many of such services on a daily basis. So there can be very good transparent models. Another very interesting use cases in cities is the urban air mobility or passenger drones and delivery drones, which will reduce congestion on the road. And there are a large section of the population who can afford that, and these are very safe. Today, unfortunately, commercial operation of passenger drones happening only in one city in China, which they started in 2019 September, and many licenses were issued in North America, New Zealand, in Europe, but none of them could happen owing to the pandemic in 2020. So we hope in the next 2 years. I come from Delhi to Bangalore in less than 3 hours, but Bangalore airport to Kochi, the area, the IT capital part, the electronic city, it takes me more than 3 hours. So I have not gone that area last 3 years, and although many people invite me. So we want to do some feasibility study, introducing passenger drones for urban air mobility. Same is the case with Bombay. Delhi to Bombay I reach in less than 2 hours. Going from Bombay airport to the South Bombay, the Nariman Point, or that area, it takes more than 2.5, 3 hours any point in time. And lastly, the digitalization, which one of the speakers have mentioned about it. Digital technologies can offer flexibility for integrating more and more renewables and a transition to a cleaner energy system. I stop here. Sorry for taking your time.
No, thank you, Reggie. I think this is quite interesting. I think they have already given 5. I have noted down 5 or 6 points which the cities could consider for low carbon transition. And this air mobility of the transportation of goods and services through the drone. I think this is quite an interesting proposition. So thank you, Reggie. And I'd like to now ask Robert because there are a couple of questions that has been raised, and also, this is part of, it is my question also to you that that related to the affordability of the rural people. You mentioned about these energy program that you were promoting, that how you can. You said that energy impact fund. So the question is that how that the people who are having the income less than $1 a day, or maybe in that range. So how do you feel that this program is suitable? So how they are actually managing to pay off their debts or whatever the scanty amount of debt they have? So if you can elaborate on that a little bit, so that will also answer a couple of questions that has been raised by the audience.
Absolutely. Obviously, that is an average, so there is some skew. A lot of these people in those income ranges, what you'll see is they'll be on a lower point in the energy ladder, so they'll be on a solar home system. And those are heavily subsidized, as are mini grids, which also allow participation from lower rung entrants. Currently in Myanmar, we target, tier 5 level of service. So, obviously they're going to have slightly higher incomes. Whenever we look at, the people that we're primarily serving, what can they afford in the course of a month? It's roughly $10. That's for connection fee plus electricity. So that is within their realm of affordability, right? And most of them are fine with that. And again, because of what electricity can do versus the alternatives that they're spending that money on, whether it be candles or batteries or even solar home systems in some instances, it's all about affordability. So we try to structure our products so that we can accommodate that. And a lot of times, because we don't charge interest on our loans, it's really just a tenor stretch. You make the loan longer, right? So if there's that income constraint, we do have instances whereby we make our loan product a bit longer in certain communities to accommodate that. Okay.
I think that is excellent. So another question, I think that is, I'm just merging a couple of questions, but this could be answered by Robert also by Amanda, because both of you are working in the small country area. So that how, because we all the time we see that in the kind of system of that the national government, then there is a regional government, then there is a city government. So these kind of things, because implementation at the local level needs the support of the local government. Now the local government for these kind of things, they always need to depend on the provincial or maybe the national government. So quite often we see that there is some kind of, either there is no standard mechanism of the regulatory engagement between these governments, or maybe there quite often there is some conflict happens, which creates some kind of a problem of implementing these programs on in a smooth way. So from both of you, I'm asking Amanda or Robert, whoever, anyone can answer this question from your experience, that what is your experience, how you feel that this kind of thing can be avoided, the conflict or maybe kind of a lack of coordination system between the provincial or the national government and the city government. Anyone? Amanda?
No, I'll be happy to go first.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm happy to go ahead, Robert, if you'd like to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Of course, there's always coordination issues from the top level to the bottom level, right? In Myanmar, we have the government's in charge of all sectors of all sectors of the power sector. So essentially, yes, there are going to be conflicts from time to time, but usually you can align the actors in an appropriate manner such that to reduce that conflict. Whenever we go in and we start to do our project, that's one of the first things that we always assess from a risk perspective is what's the alignment between the local, the state, up to the union. So there's a lot of work put into that. And we have some really good relationships that we've been able to, fortunately, avoid most of the conflict.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's always been issues in terms of in Tonga. It's a little different because it's smaller, but in other countries I've worked in, like Indonesia, they have a lot of overlap or conflict between sort of the mandates at the local, provincial, and national level, and that can lead to a number of issues. And I think that where we tend to try and make the recommendations or the alignments is, trying to get the decisions as close to the appropriate decision maker. So if it's, some sort of small community project, get that decision as close to the community and as far from the central as possible. It's always, difficult for the governments to give up power. So that is a challenge, but it is sort of a multi-stakeholder process and trying to just get those decisions as close to the people who are most impacted by them, and empowering those governments or communities to be able to make those decisions. But it's absolutely a tension in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so I'm just going to answer one of the questions here on disaster resilience of energy systems. I think it is very important to be aware of the kind of hazards that you have when you deploy energy systems in locations, islands, or wherever it is. Again, back to the thing of appropriateness of the technologies, right? So for certain island locations, for instance, it might be known that there might be more than 20, 30, 40 typhoons that come through this island, and yet people still live there. So would you deploy renewable energy type number 1 versus renewable energy type number 2? What kind of operation and maintenance regimes you would have for them? If you deploy them, let's say for 6 months out of a year, then you need to pull them back for 2 months out of the year. So you need to take that into consideration as well. That's not to say that hybrid systems, even if you were disaster sensitive, would not work, because you can have a sharing of the type of risks that you have. So if you had a combination of wind, marine, solar, energy storage on an island where some of these systems may not be as quote unquote safe during disaster period, but useful the rest of the time, then you might want to plan for that as built into the project design already. In terms of technology solutions, I would say we have yet to control climate nor predict when typhoon happens. So not at this point, but we can prepare for the impact of such events. So now I know, at least for after the Typhoon Yolanda, after the storm surge hit the Philippines, the government, local all the way to national, has basically tried to have disaster preparedness kits are made available to the citizens. But I mean, you can imagine that having renewable energy systems as part of the disaster preparedness kit should actually be there. Right now, people are talking about, oh, you know, they need to have a diesel generator, they need to have access to fuel. Sure, but can you not change that? Instead of using a diesel genset as your backup, you may want to use a renewable energy kit rather than a diesel kit. Or a hybrid kit, and you know, that plays in a part into also how they transition now, looking at the current community or the city in terms of the way that they electrify themselves. When I say electrify themselves, you know, looking at all the electrification efforts that they have, and really unifying that strategy so that they don't end up with many small programs or many small projects that don't seem to have a unifying thread. And a lot of them end up not knowing these at the moment. So we've talked to more than 100 or 200 local government units, and the primary programs are top 5 primary programs for energy transitions would be street lights, solar powered street lights. That's one of the main things. Electric vehicles, be it for smaller tricycles to jeepneys. Green buildings, you know, putting solar on their rooftop and their parking areas and the like. There's lighting, changing to LED and inside their government offices, etc. And there's sort of renewable energy for their remote communities. So these are sort of the 5 top, you would say, low-hanging fruits that they know that they can execute, but these are not as ambitious as what we would like them to be. I mean, and none of these probably incorporate any form of disaster resilience into them just yet. So we need to take a little bit of a leap beyond just that, you know. So anyway, so back to
yes, Michael, thank you so much and for your deliberation on this, because this is quite, and we are almost touching the ceiling of our time. So this is the time as a moderator to wrap this session up, because this is the time that is given to us. Though we have discussed a lot of things, but there are a lot of things that we could have discussed, but due to the constraint of time, we could not. But thank you all. And actually, I summarized, before I close, I just wanted to summarize that whatever we have discussed. So there are 3 presentations that has been made, one on the regulatory issues of bringing RE in the countries like Tonga. We also discussed about that how the new energy, energy impact fund kind of thing, which can enabling energy access and energy poverty in the small areas in Myanmar. Also, we have discussed that how the electric cooking and the other things can also bring the benefit to the community. And our panelist, Dr. Thang Do, who has elaborated his experience from his work in the ASEAN region as a greater context, and he has already nicely highlighted the importance of the citizens' involvement in the development of the renewables in the local area. And also thanks to Michael, who brought the ideas of digitizations in the whole process and how this whole things can be considered under the appropriateness, because the technological appropriateness is very, very important for its quick and successful adoption in the region for low carbon transition and achieving NDCs and SDG goals as well, and going much beyond that. So I thank all my speakers and panelists for such an interesting and quite insightful deliberation for last 1.5 hours. And I really thank all my audience who patiently listened to us. I must say that all the questions may not be, we could answer in this short span of time, but all these questions has been recorded. So we'll try to answer these questions, individually if our speakers agree that we can share these questions to them, and individually they can respond to that. And at the end, I must thank to all the ADB people and the team behind who made this, this digital version of panel possible seamlessly. Thank you all behind the screen, and thank you the audience. And have a nice and safe stay. Thank you all. Goodbye.